Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill him! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
I'm joined by JigokuCake. He was on 2 episodes of the show at the very beginning, so he's a true OG saint. And I am very excited to welcome him back. And he's a prolific author. He is a scholar. He has a Substack, and he is an amazing Twitter mutual follow. Someone I've actually been acquainted with and known for quite a long time, at least almost my entire Twitter career. So it's really great to have you. And please plug your project, your books, your Substack, and I'll obviously let you do it again at the end. But just for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with you and hasn't heard those first episodes, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hell yeah, brother man. Yeah, I guess I'm glad to be an OG on the show here. It's always hard to try to describe what I do online, because it's just kind of my web presence is something that kind of evolved organically. I actually had somebody ask me recently in a private conversation. They were asking me for advice on how to grow their Twitter following and how to start a Substack and everything, get an audience. And I was like, well, I can't answer that because I don't know. I just started. I made it my Twitter account. I didn't plan on getting any kind of substantial audience or anything. I mainly just wanted to yell at journalists and stuff, and just kind of vent my frustration at certain things, and of course shitpost and everything, make memes. The stuff that I guess I'm going to be discussing here with you was more. It was something I kind of got into for various reasons. A lot of it was circumstances in my life, kind of leading me to want to discuss kind of Buddhism and Eastern mysticism and things like that. And I wasn't aware that there was actually an audience for it online or anything. It was just something I wanted to talk about and something I was interested in, and it kind of I figured out pretty quickly actually that other people were interested in as well, which was pretty cool. So I do a lot of that. Just kind of, I like to just research stuff in my spare time and look into things that I'm interested in. And I write a lot because I don't know. It's my hobby. It helps me sleep at night. To get all this the ideas floating around your head and put them on a page, and makes you feel nice and calm afterwards. So I do that. I do a little bit of writing almost every day, and that kind of led to me not only making a Substack blog, but also self-publishing some books where I just discuss various things that I think are either important or interesting or both. And that's what I do. And I have my newest book is called Devadatta, Who Was a Good Friend. That's it's more a kind of Lotus Sutra centric, but it kind of uses some of the subjects from the Lotus Sutra and from the writings of Nichiren and things like that. And it branches off of that. And I use it to kind of explore a lot of different avenues, one of which we're going to be discussing today, which is Myo-ken Bosatsu, the bodhisattva of the North Star or Big Dipper, or however you want to classify him. And I actually I don't discuss him too much in the book, but he does come up. There's a chapter dedicated to UFOs and aliens and things like that, and kind of intertwining that with different concepts from Buddhism. And he comes up in that, obviously, because of his association with the stars and space. And
Well,
I guess,
obviously, oh, sorry about
that's
that.
me.
Well,
Oh no, I'm finished.
okay. Well, I apologize for interrupting, but you had me like right when you said. But I do want to say, like, your work on Kukai, on Nichiren, on Lotus Sutra in particular, like the discussions that we've had in like maybe a private Buddhist forum, we'll call it, have been very edifying for me personally, simply because I'm able to look at those texts that more of the Mahayana. I'm not saying you're more Mahayanist, but I'm saying that you present it more in that way, but you're saying also, which is the more tantric way, this is also very esoteric. There's something deeper here. It's not the full literalist meaning, and that's much more of a tantric understanding. And in fact, I would even argue, I know Kukai won't like that, but I would argue that there is actually a tantric layer in the Lotus Sutra that is maybe a little different. It has a little bit of a different contour edge than the actual words on the page. But it's there. It's in the words. It's just, it's a little subtle.
No, actually, I think Kukai would make that exact argument. If you read his commentary on the Heart Sutra, he basically outright states like that the sutras are that the Mahayana sutras are something that can be read in a tantric manner.
Mm-hmm.
Or well, it's not. I guess like the distinction between sutra and tantra is kind of it's a little different in Japanese Buddhism,
Right.
because like when you look into like Shingon and Tendai and the esoteric lineage that they had, they actually refer to like the what we would refer to as tantric texts were referred to as sutras, basically. So it's very, they did classify them differently depending on who was giving the teaching. So the esoteric sutras are considered to have been given by Mahavajrayana or Dainichi Nyorai, and the exoteric sutras were expounded by Shakyamuni Buddha. But the actual classification is like a little fuzzier. It's very like even Nichiren, he would say that the Mahavajrayana Sutra is like on the same level as a lot of the other Mahayana sutras. Like it's like mixed in there. It's all like a big thing.
Well, as you know, JC, there's a multi-school sort of categorization system also in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm sure you've heard us discuss it many times, and so it's not clear cut either. Like, there's the Nyingma way of organization, and then there's the Sarma schools. But even that's not the way. Even it's described as more of in a Gelugpa framing. It's not really necessarily how it's dispensed. Especially then you include termas, and then you're including pranaparamita sutras, like to go along with the idea that sutras can also be tantric. This is also an idea in Tibetan Tantra or Tibetan Buddhism, is that definitely certain sutras are tantric in their content and character, but they are, to borrow from our friend Neon Tiger, they are sutric in their presentation. So they're a little more... they're just a little, they can be accessed by, we'll call them quote unquote a normie, but really the layer is deeper and much deeper. And there are even, I hesitate to use the word magic, but because we have been long acquainted, I'll just use that word. But there are some magical elements, maybe ritual elements, that are sometimes recorded and dispensed as advice to perform even in sutras. So I think people would be surprised to sort of hear that, because it's, in my experience online, especially with Buddhist Twitter, it's uncommon that people even have that notion that there can be actual ritual prescriptions in the Mahayana sutras just of themselves, but particularly the esoteric ones.
Yeah, no, it's actually everywhere in the Mahayana sutras. Even the Lotus Sutra, there's Dharanis and stuff that are considered to have magical properties and such. So it's not it is like a kind of a fuzzy like it kind of gets fuzzy when you're trying to delineate between certain themes and such. Like you could say, oh, the tantras have like magical qualities to them. It's like, well, not just them. It's very things can bleed into each other, and they can be interpreted differently depending on what analytical lens you're using.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's one of the things that separates the different schools from each other is like you need kind of a way to decode what you're reading. Because like if you read even just some Mahayana sutras by themselves, if you just read those, you could actually come away with like conflicting ideas of what like for example, like what a bodhisattva is supposed to be, what a Buddha is, things like that. So schools, all these different schools of thought kind of came about because they had different ways of interpreting them. And usually that means classifying texts in certain ways and holding ones that's more authoritative. So you could use those to go back and decode the other ones and say, okay, well, this is how it plays into, this idea, yada, yada. So I think it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt again.
Go ahead.
You said something so fascinating, and obviously something that I talk about on this show more broadly is this idea of metafiction, or which is really about intertextual relationships, broad themes over time and space, but like with specific choices. Maybe you could call it, if you're thinking in a dharmic lens, like sort of like assertions of the truth, the primordial truth, obviously contained in relative terms that will appear and reappear. So you have to be able to kind of understand them.
Yeah.
Like you should be able to, as a Tibetan Buddhist, I should be able to go and read the Lotus Sutra. It doesn't mean I'm going to understand every little, nuance and facet, because there's something else that you said, that transmission, the kind of like who has taught you, presented and interpreted this text, what commentaries are you reading on top of it, and what other practices are you doing? Because a lot of Tantra is about practices. And it's also about that transmission, like where you get, like, what is your original source from something that is like known to exist, or is it sort of a more diluted source? So the one way to rectify that would be like, using the Manjushri Mulakalpa would be like to purify some of the wisdom back into the non-dual kind of primordial, Manjushri wisdom fire sword. He cuts the seeds. That's kind of the visualization. So I just think there's something really interesting about what you're saying. It's like, that's what's, I think makes Buddhist Twitter so, it's like a frontier. It's like it's almost like the Wild West from my experience. Because everyone has their preconceptions of what everything should be. And I'm sure you encounter this a lot, even probably when I sometimes make forays into making comments on Japanese Buddhism or esoteric Buddhism broadly, because there's a specificity, geographic specificity and textual specificity. Sometimes it's probably not exact. Like, I just speak more broadly, and that's kind of my style, but you're very precise, and I really appreciate that about you. And I think that you bring a lot of clarity for people who are, you don't have to even be like particularly interested in Japanese Buddhism to engage with your work, but I think it obviously helps, and obviously people are hungry for esoterica.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think, and I went on a Twitter rant ago about how I was really frustrated with the state of kind of mainstream Buddhism. So if you look at like, there's these like big magazines, like Tricycles, like the big one, and then there's another one called Lion's Roar and stuff. And it wasn't actually even that Twitter thread wasn't even spurred on by those magazines in particular. I kind of quote tweeted one of them just as an example, but just a lot of it's just kind of, I've been frustrated with kind of how lethargic and geriatric a lot of like mainstream Buddhism in America is, and how much a lot of it just seems to be kind of, people's expectations of Buddhism have been colored by certain forms that were secularized and kind of homogenized into like a easily consumable form, a corporate friendly form. that's not really representative of what Buddhism is broadly. But that's what most people are getting in terms of the stuff. And I was thinking about it a little bit yesterday too, and kind of, just trying to figure out my own thoughts on the matter, why I feel this way. And when I look at some of my favorite historical Buddhist teachers, so Nichiren, obviously, Kukai, Suzuki Shosan is a really good one. They're all men who exude a lot of vitality, in their writings and in their lives. Certain vitality that I think is missing for the most part these days, except among some people I've met on Buddhist Twitter, like yourself. But if you look at Kukai, so Kukai, for example, there are theories going around that Kukai was actually multiple people, and that we're taking like the achievements of multiple people and putting them under this one name, because he was able to accomplish so much in his life. He was basically a genius. He went to China to learn the esoteric lineage there, and he absorbed all of it in under 2 years, according to the stories. And then he went back to Japan and he founded his own school, and it became this huge phenomenon over there. And he founded all sorts of temples. He did crazy amount of writing, and people look at the stuff that he did and they're just like, I don't think a single guy could have done that. Like, who has the energy for that? And so Nichiren too. I mean, he's obviously one of the most passionate writers probably in history, and he was able to. He was exiled twice, and it just ended up reinforcing his faith and his theological understanding. And he ended up, even though he died at a relatively young age, he was able to leave a huge impact on his country and in Buddhism in general. Suzuki Shosan, that's another guy I think he described his approach as what he wanted to see from people is that they would attack things like a rabid dog, I think was the quote from his sayings. And he actually, he had his own temple that he was running, and he left it to go to Edo and kind of teach people there, just because he wasn't satisfied with just staying at a temple and doing the work there. And just like, another one, Ikkyu, the Zen master, kind of his approach and his focus on vitality and youthful energy is just, even though he's kind of a controversial figure, probably even now somewhat, he had a certain vitality that's, I think, is essential. Like he was an eccentric Zen master who would go to whorehouses and go to bars and get drunk all the time and stuff, and basically all the things you're not really supposed to do as a Buddhist. And if you read his poetry, there's like a certain essence in there that's just very powerful, and it kind of resonates with me. So, like, looking at all these figures, like I think there is an essence of vitality that's lacking, just not only in Buddhism in the modern world, but in general in the modern world.
So I agree with you 100%. I think you probably. I think we kind of are parallel in many of our sort of like views on Dharma in the West, or Dharma even in the world. However, I'm trying to think of it more from an Eastern lens, because a lot of aside from a specific portion of Buddhist Twitter who's from the subcontinent, but everyone else, the East Asians, at least the Southeast Asians, they're very vital in their Buddhism. So I feel like that is dharmically very positive. It's spoken about in the Kala Chakra, like a kind of revitalization among like formerly kind of like Asuric nations, or like places where the spark had sort of diminished, but then sort of revitalized. And I've said this on another episode, but Madam Shi is actually a famed Kala Chakran Tantrika, quite well known in China and recognized by many of the teachers. And she also organized the 6th Buddhist World Conference, which is also interesting because the Kala Chakra Tantra uses the 60-year cycle in astrology. That would also be very metaphysically significant for just shifting of the sort of kalpas, which is often discussed in that same text. But also, so I'm trying to think of it like Dharma, and I'm citing someone here, HD25, but he said Dharma in the West is so new. It's just a spark. It's just like a lotus seed, and it won't grow just anywhere. You have to throw it in the right place, and it will take form, according to our kind of Western preconceptions, our Western sort of minds. But it hasn't really, it's not really there. It hasn't arisen from the mud. I'm trying to use a very, more Lotus Sutra Japanese imagery, but it still works for Buddhism. So, but yeah, it's the seed, and it hasn't quite taken root. So I try and think of it like it's a frontier. We're like the ones on the frontier, people like you who are like doing like physical material work, intellectual work on this kind of like unknown category, especially popular consciousness, like at least in like even in Esoterica, like people totally don't understand Buddhism, in my opinion, in magic or in occult circles, like even Tantra, even Indian Tantra. I feel like my understanding of it, maybe I'm just really off base, but I actually feel like I feel like I actually have a good understanding. Maybe not perfect, but I feel like I have a good understanding. So I feel like there's that too.
Yeah, I can't imagine that you're I can't imagine that you're too off base. Your knowledge base and the stuff is pretty massive from what I've heard from you. I mean, you're one of the main guys I go to whenever I need some questions answered on this stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, and my background is more art history, so iconography, obviously, it's the first thing that I recognize, right? So then, when you sort of like gain deeper understanding, I spoke about this with Low IQ Moron from the Thoughts and Prayers podcast. The American religion, or the American Dharma, as I like to call it, it's going to be new. It's not really going to be exactly the same. It's going to like be a little weird. It's going to be a little American. It's going to be a little pop culture. That's just the way of it. So yeah, that's kind of what I think. It's just so when that form emerges, where it's like it mixes the real with the kind of like illusory pop aesthetic that people seem to gravitate towards, then that will what will capture people. Plant the seeds, at least.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be futurist.
And I like the example you used of the ember, where it's like it has to be in the right place at the right time to kind of work. I think one of the frustrations, which I'm not sure I made entirely clear in my Twitter thread, was how do I put this? So the way a lot of like the mainstream publications and stuff in Buddhism operate right now, it's kind of like a way that you would expect some like old established religion that's on the decline to act when that's become like, confident in its perpetuation to the point where it just becomes kind of decadent and lazy. And but the irony is that it's American Buddhism really hasn't done much. So it's like you would it's Japanese Buddhism is on the decline too. It's kind of in this kind of stagnant decline, but it did a whole lot. This is after like 1,000 years. This mainstream American Buddhism stuff is like doing worse, but it's without having even accomplished anything of like left any kind of significant cultural impact. So I think that there's kind of like a interesting thing there. And someone had pointed out in my replies, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but they said, Buddhism always adapts to the cultures where it's spread. And so you have to kind of expect it to absorb some of these, kind of disadvantageous elements too, when it comes to that side of things. So I think that there is, that's kind of an interesting thought too. If Americans really kind of embrace this, what I call like the entrepreneurial self, this kind of view of oneself as like a business entity, like a everybody has like their resume and they have to sell themselves as like a business with itself and market themselves. It kind of makes sense that if Buddhism is transmitted here, that it's going to like how a bird's feathers will accumulate like dust and dirt as it walks through a city, like a pigeon or something. That Buddhism is gonna start to accumulate these kind of detrimental habits and views that Americans have, and they're gonna kind of like latch onto it and kind of drag it down and make it heavier. So you have like this. That's why there's like a certain expectation when people, you have these people who adapt different elements of like Buddhist theory and philosophy and try to like sell it. So you have like the mindfulness movement, if you want to call it that, and then the jhana thing. That's kind of a more recent thing, but kind of in a similar vein. They've kind of accumulated this baggage that comes with kind of Western culture and how people view themselves here, and like primarily this idea that you have to sell yourself and have like a sellable product. So that's kind of like the form that the Dharma ends up getting mutated into in these certain respects. So that's another thing I've been thinking about over the past few days, and it's that's probably another big source of my frustration which I'm trying to decode.
That was really well said. And, I obviously share all of this. I share everything that you said. I agree with. I think that the problem with the Dharma, or the truth, if we're going to call it that, is it's very hard to sell the truth. Like, what can you say? It's, it's like the truth. It's what it is. It's like, I mean, it's very difficult to sell people like a thing that isn't, because Buddhism could just be Zen, like American Buddhism. It could just be Zen. It could be very simplistic. It could be very like aniconic.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same thing, right? Like the word is the word is the word. So it doesn't really matter. It can just be transmitted in whatever way. The problem is like it's a really hard package to be like, yeah, this is like a system. You have to work it. You have to like do this, and then it starts to sound, even in saying that now, it sounds very New Age almost, which is maybe interesting or detrimental. Probably both. So, but do I think that I think this is the problem. If I'm going to make any critique of American Dharma, all the yanas, whatever, cross lineage, just embrace the idea that reality is more permeable, more fluid, more in flux than than the sort of Western's, whatever that is, Western standard mind believes it to be. And then also that maybe you can influence it in the good way by practicing Dharma. So I think if they sold it more magic pill, like just they said, like, yeah, it's kind of magic, just do it and you'll see like a small benefit. I think that actually that's okay. For Americans, I think they would really eat it. But that's just like my personal Buddhist, like conspiracy king, like idea. It's not necessarily like grounded in material reality.
I mean, that is a good point, because if you think about like the way Buddhism was spread in places like Japan, it was a lot of it like, oh, this is gonna have like metaphysical, supernatural impacts on your life if you follow it. And even in the texts and stuff, like if you look at the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, all these kinds of texts, they'll say like, if you read and understand and spread the sutra, you're gonna good things are gonna happen to you.
Yeah,
that's just how it goes. That's always how it's been. So I mean, if that's the way, if that's how it works, and if that works in spreading the Buddha Dharma, then I mean that's built into the system. It's pretty much unavoidable. So it's completely valid, I think. And I just remembered actually who left that reply to my Twitter thread. I think it was Spacepunk, that user on Twitter.
Oh yes.
And they use the phrase, if I'm getting this right, Sam Harrisification of
that's good.
think that there is an element of that in there. It's kind of a funny term, but yeah.
No, I mean, I agree. Obviously, I agree with you. I think that the idea has been to embrace psychology as the sort of outer, the kind of like, that's the sales pitch. It's like we're gonna say that Dharma is psychology. I think Dharma works so much better as metaphysics. I think that psychology doesn't fit in those metaphysics almost at all. Do I think that there's a psychological implication, if you want to call it that? Sure. Like mind, that's obviously well discussed, as you know. But there's also like it's like it's about the three things at the same time, like the three gates or the three, whatever you want to call it, the three syllables, the three primordial colors. It's the unification, and then like obviously it's empty, so you're not holding on. That was very tantric, but I apologize for that. But no, I think you're totally right though, is that I think that psychology didn't work, and I think that it's okay to say that didn't work. And I think that it's okay to also say that, like, that's not a great way to do it, because then what modern American psychology becomes is a way to also sell politics. And I think you also know this, is that it becomes like, what are your feelings telling you? But your feelings are your biggest source of both truth and bullshit. So
yeah.
You know, it's like
that's also a very tantric way of looking at it.
Well, I have been accused of having a somewhat tantric worldview by several who are my senior practitioners. I'm not a senior tantric practitioner, but by other people who I would definitely consider like far above me. And so I don't know if that's true, but I like to think that I do. I think it's an interesting thought experiment that maybe I do have a little bit of a tantric way of looking at it. But I think that makes sense also because I like actually practice Tantra. And I think that when you are doing the practices like very seriously, and I think the weird thing is that COVID, and you and I spoke about this in your first episode, is that COVID really helped me, not because of anything else, but because I like put everything else aside and just focused on that. So for me, it was like a huge moment of like, whoa, let's like really practice like how it's like supposed to be properly. And then I was like, okay, now, yeah, I get it now. I get like all those things I learned for like, you know, like 15, 20 years. It all makes sense now. Maybe not 100%, but you start to see a lot more of, you see the connections between the things a lot more, is what I'm trying to say. You're not so dualistic.
Yeah, and I mean that's going to be true for pretty much any kind of Buddhist practice, or even just I think just basic prayer and faith. You know, like the 100%. Pureland style can like have like extremely transformative effects on your brain, even in ways that you don't even realize. And
sorry, I'm glad you brought
what's
up
great about the Buddha Dharma.
No, sorry to interrupt you. The Buddha Dharma is great. Okay, just let me say that. But then also it really is great. Like I really don't care. Like, you know, all the other systems, I'm familiar with them. I like some of them. I dislike other ones. I'm the most comfortable in Buddha Dharma. This is how I feel. It's just like it makes sense to me. The other things might make sense in a symbolic way or even a metaphysical way. Like, yeah, I can like kind of map it out or, you know, understand the dialectical relationship between what the ideas and the logic is. But Buddha Dharma kind of like, it's to me, I'm not trying to be like all feels or anything, but to me, it is the truth. So that's why I like it. It feels right. Like, as much as feelings can be both wrong and right, that it feels right to me. So I'm going with that. But I also think what you also said was correct. Is like, anyways, I want you to keep going. I apologize for derailing.
Oh no, fine. That's what we're here for. Yeah, it's a big tangent festival. That's when we talk, and that's kind of what's great about it. You know, there's so many different branches we could go down with these conversations. But actually, bring it back to what you said about you made an interesting point about psychology, kind of how the Dharma is kind of interpreted through the lens of kind of a more materialist, psychological, kind of that kind of mindset. One of the things actually that I was really intent on doing with the book that I recently put out was I wanted to kind of, I guess, show alternatives to that, show that it could be looked at through all kinds of different perspectives, and kind of like I tried to weave lots of different ideas and topics into it. But when I was writing it, a lot of the times I would think like, what would I want to read when I was like a recovering atheist? Like what would I want to see? Because if I saw like the kind of like more new age tinged or like kind of business oriented modern interpretations of the Buddha Dharma back at that point, I would have just promptly ignored it and just rejected it entirely. And I wanted something less materialist and feels more wide reaching than just kind of this like psychological self-therapy, self-help practice. And that I think I mostly succeeded in that. I think if I had read what I wrote, if I had sent it to my past self, I think my past self would have really appreciated kind of these perspectives being presented. So I feel like I accomplished my goal with the book largely. But that was one of the goals was to kind of counteract all that stuff.
I really appreciate that you said that, but I'm going to say one thing before we discuss more of your book and Myo-ken, is this idea of the Pureland. So I was trying to formulate sort of what I was even thinking. That's why I didn't continue sort of that tangent. But then you said something else interesting. You said like if you had seen the New Age presentation of Dharma, you wouldn't have embraced it necessarily. Yeah. But there is a way, I think, maybe you'll disagree, and that's okay. Just an idea, but maybe Pureland and the New Age presentation of Buddhism, maybe those are almost the same thing. Maybe that's like a neo Pureland, because Pureland in a lot of the East Asian countries, and I don't know about Japan, but I'm just saying in the Chinese diaspora areas like Southeast Asia, like where my family's from, it has a very theosophical undercurrent. It has a very magical religious undercurrent, or not even undercurrent, like that's a lot of what it is. So I could see how it could be repackaged in a way. I'm not saying that New Age, the kind of New Age theosophical Buddhism that we often see in popular culture is the truth or is Buddha Dharma necessarily, but there is an element of that where you can sort of see that, oh, okay, maybe it's Kali Yuga, maybe this, maybe the truth just got really degraded, and it's just like these little, it's like the little specks still there, and that could be true too, right?
Some would make that argument for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not, although this is like a direct, I guess I'm going the opposite direction of my old views, is that I look at the New Age or the theosophical stuff and the more like medieval Chinese Pureland stuff, and I say, oh, there is a similarity, because China did have a lot of millenarian, Taoist, Buddhist, very syncretic cults. So and this was often tolerated alongside some of the more we'll call them the more, you used a great word, psychedelic. You described the sutras as very psychedelic, and some of them are very psychedelic. So I just think that if you kind of look at it like that, oh, okay, then some of these theosophy, New Age, like angel stuff and all of that, it kind of makes sense in a way. I'm not saying it's like that's what to follow. I'm just saying there is an element that makes sense, kind of.
Well, and I guess I should specify. I don't want to shit on New Agers or anything. I mean, I think I've known plenty of people who are into that stuff, and I think some of it's good. I don't want to just kind of trash New Age stuff wholesale. I think it can be good for some people, but I think one of my main issues, I think, with New Age, and and I guess we're going on another tangent here, but I think
That's okay. Let's go for
it. One of my issues with it is kind of the same issue I have with like the kind of corporate mindfulness stuff is that it doesn't feel real to me. It feels so. I mean, there is a real core to it, just like there's a real core to mindfulness and things like that. But there's a certain Funko Popification that happens in kind of our very consumerist oriented modernity, where I'm writing some essays about this right now. So I don't my current work in progress essay is about this exact phenomenon. Kind of how the kind of more neoliberal corporatist mindset that's been internalized kind of leads to a lot of a reiteration of older ideas, but in a kind of more market-friendly way, where you, like I said, it's Funko Popification. I might use that in the essay, actually. These things are homogenized and kind of castrated in a certain way to make them available to a consumer in a consumable fashion. But it loses something essential in that act. And there's a YouTuber named Dave Green, also the distributist, who was talking on a recent podcast about slopification, where slop is his definition of slop is something that it takes on the outer form of something, but it loses the essential quality that made that original thing important in the first place. And I think that's kind of a lot of what happens with the New Age stuff. So when you go to like Barnes and Nobles and you see all these kind of like bargain bin books about like astrological magic and crystals and things like that, that's basically what this is. It's this, it's a Funko Pop of like spiritual beliefs and spirituality. It's not really the thing,
Yeah, you're 100%. First of all, I love that term when I read it that you wrote, Funko Popification. I think that's perfect for you, like your account, your like whole aesthetic. I think that's great, good writing. And then also on that idea, I was thinking it is kind of like they do take real magical things, like crystals are obviously used in Tantra, like astrology is obviously a big part of Tantra. It's like there are real things, but then they mall churchify. It's like that discourse that happened about mall churches, and like they sort of like became lesser and lesser and lesser, sort of like it became desacralized instead of it contained. And that is true also, and that is definitely a very fair criticism of New Age. And I am not a fan of New Age. I'm just trying to reappraise some of the things I had thought about it, simply because not everyone is ready. Like clearly people have a lot of preconceptions of what they think Dharma should be and where they think and how it should apply to them. And so I think that is one of the, I think it's one of the things that, at least in this life, if it plants a small seed for their next life, that's great.
Yeah, and I've actually come around to that same mindset where, I'll see people, even though they have like kind of mistaken views about the Dharma, or they have they have this kind of a syncretic view of it, New Agey view. I kind of see it as like, well, it's better than most of the alternatives that society is presenting them right now. They're making steps towards something. They know that there's something missing and they're looking for it. But they're just not there yet. They have to incrementally move towards that, and I think it can be positive.
So okay, so we won't derail, and I will actually let you get to the meat of your book and Myo-ken. But I thought it was great because it doesn't make sense for us not to be together, like in conversation and discuss like the state of Buddhist Twitter, the state of Western Dharma. I think that, I think that people probably would expect it, at least that we make like, we have a discussion about it. So there we go. We did that. So we will go on to your book and Myo-ken, which is a really interesting topic. And don't feel like if you don't feel, the rest of the time, if you run out of time, don't worry, we'll just do part 2.
I feel like this is like this is kind of how like Kukai viewed like go back to an earlier topic, actually. This is how Kukai viewed like analyzing sutras and like mantras and stuff. It's like, oh, you can just like extrapolate infinity topics and less teachings and stuff out of like a single mantra and everything. It's like that's how our conversations act, you know, which is great. I think.
It is. It's like it's the when I described it in the past, it's like the Russian nesting dolls. It's like that. That's how it should be. It should be like the words that you speak remind me of things. If we're specifically speaking about Buddhism or Tantra specifically, then I'm obviously the associations will become stronger. So that's a much more. There's something that is. I've been thinking about this idea of Rime and how there's like a dialectical monism kind of built in, but then it's also like emptiness doctrine. So you understand things, but then you also let them go. So I also think that that's interesting about conversations just generally is that you kind of let it flow and see what happens rather than like, yeah, you have a topic. Like I've done lots of series and shows and stuff, but I find it more interesting to just do this.
This is fun. This is great. But now that we've spilled the tea, as the Zoomers like to say, I don't even know if they're still saying that. Anyway, now that we've spilled the tea, all right, we're gonna talk about the I guess what we originally intended to be the main topic was Myo-ken, who is as I stated earlier, the Bodhisattva of and the Big Dipper or North Star or however you want to classify them. It's kind of wobbly there. Well, most things in Buddhism are wobbly. So, but so all right, where do you even start with Myo-ken? Okay, so 5,000 years ago.
Okay.
So I mean. So it's not a surprise that kind of star worship and astrology and things like that are a big deal in Chinese mysticism. So like from the very beginning, there was beliefs around the Big Dipper and such as like the chariot of the gods, and even like in Taoism and stuff, there's all sorts of astrological stuff integrated into it. So that's an important thing to kind of hold in mind when you're thinking of Myo-ken, because if you try to look for a Myo-ken in like the Mahayana sutras, say like you just start reading them and you're like, I want to learn about Myo-ken. I'm going to start reading the sutras, starting with the 100,000 line Prajna Paramita Sutra. That's you could read for like a decade and you're not going to find his name anywhere. Because he only appears, I believe his name appears in exactly one text, which is a collection of Dharanis that is believed to be, at least by modern scholars, believed to be of Chinese origin. And this was one of the texts that Kukai brought to Japan. I'm not sure. I mean, the esoteric text came in piecemeal into Japan, so I'm not sure if he brought them. But usually if you say something like that, it's going to be, there's like a 50-50 chance of you being right if you say Kukai brought it over. But so this is one of the esoteric texts that came from China to Japan. And but Myo-ken's story doesn't begin there, because prior to that, there were some other beliefs around the stars and things like that that came in from China that kind of syncretized with Myo-ken to make this figure. So, like I said, you got to go back to China with the beliefs around the stars and things like that.
Can I just make a note on that really quick?
Yeah.
So I follow the work of, I'm sure you're familiar with him, Jeffrey Kotick. He is like a Buddhist scholar. He wrote like the definitive book on like Iranian and Buddhist astrology. It was really dense. I haven't even like made a third of it in, but anyways, it's very dense. It's rigorous, and so because you have to like cross-reference it all, especially for me because I actually am good at tantric astrology, so I have to, as you have to go back and like look through multiple sources and see if you can find it in that way. So he talks a lot about how China actually at one point preferred the planetary deities over the asterisms, but the asterism represents the older traditions. Now, I will say this, as a diaspora kid, I did not even know that Chinese even worshipped the planetary deities. The stars are much more preferred. So I just think that that's really interesting. And there's also a festival of the 9 emperor gods, which is very popular in Southeast Asia, which I believe personally has a lot to do with Myo-ken and sort of like this cross syncretism, because really the North Star, well, we can get into this later, but the Big Dipper at least is associated with a primordial mother, but it's also a daughter because there's the Little Dipper as well. So I just think that there's something really interesting with that. But yeah, the China seemed to go through different phases where they preferred planetary deities over stars, and then the sort of flip happened. So I think that's an interesting thing to also consider.
Yeah, and actually, I was gonna kind of make a similar point with Japan, kind of this idea of like phases and like what's preferred, what kind of worship is preferred over other kinds, because it's similar principle at play. So very early on, like neither planets nor stars were worshipped at all. Well, not at all, but very rarely. So if you look at the texts like the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki and the super early Japanese literature, which are the remaining records of the mythology that was passed down, there are references to like star deities, but they're very few and far in between. And this kind of indicates when you're looking at these. Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh no, I didn't say anything. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So when you're looking at these texts, there's kind of there's a theological aspect to them, but there's also like an anthropological and archaeological aspect to them. So when you're looking at them through those lenses, you could say, maybe there were some star worshippers back in the day, but they were either subjugated or like integrated into these other clans, and these other clans who worship the sun or earth gods and things like that, and they became kind of less important in the grand scheme of things.
I think it's like a really fascinating way to narrate like that early history as more dynamic and more like, yeah, maybe there were star worshipers amongst like these other religions. Maybe they didn't even have their own particular religion. Maybe they were just contained within like this other tradition. I think that's a really interesting way to think about it.
And I think the way that the Japanese view the deities, like these, I guess we call them Shinto deities now, is kind of different from other theological perspectives. So they would see them as like this god is our clan's ancestor, like they would say, and this carries into the texts. So there is like a kind of aspect of that actually written into the text, like, okay, well, this was the kind of like a form of ancestor worship for these certain clans. Like they would say, like, this god we came from this god, and we're gonna worship them like we worship our ancestors.
In reference to the 9 emperor gods from Taoism, especially like the Southern Chinese Taoism, because that same conflation happens. Is that they are originally asterism or planetary deities. Nobody's really clear on it. But then there's also like this idea that they are also these certain 9 deified sons of this emperor from the Qin dynasty. So I think that's really interesting. They kind of like put their ancestor worship, which seems to not be the oldest religion. That's my opinion. Is that I don't think ancestor worship is the older thing, but I think they also put it on the more celestial thing, which is, as you're saying, maybe that's not the oldest thing either. Maybe the earth god thing is like the yaksha cults or the sun and moon cults, which you could also say is a yaksha cult in some ways. But yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. I think it's interesting. You could think of it as like competing theories of reality.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's inevitable you're going to have like these like different interpretations of the text, because the Japanese, they didn't have a written text prior to Chinese being introduced in like the 6th century, I believe, 6th or 7th. So there's just nothing there, no written record at least. So you have to go back and kind of extrapolate based on the evidence you have, like how these ideas came into being, what the if the theological perspectives were the same or if they changed over time. And there's evidence to suggest that they did change. I've heard people say that, like Amaterasu is commonly conceived of as a goddess of the sun these days, but may have been male in the past and had like a different kind of placement in theology, and just all sorts of things like that. There's the issue of Suwa Daimyojin, I believe, who is the kind of some of the shrine records and history conflict with how that deity is described in the Nihon Shoki and the Kojiki and things like that. So it's hard to find the kind of a definitive story. Like it's hard to find a definitive narrative because you have to extrapolate so many elements, and so you're going to get conflicting theories and such. But regardless, it's just seems to be the truth, at least, that star worship was not excessively common in early Japanese religion. And actually, the primary source I used for information about Myo-ken, there's a book called The Fluid Pantheon, which has like a very extensive chapter, very dense with information about Myo-ken. And the author of that book theorizes that some of the ancient Japanese, at least, probably viewed the stars with a certain fear or distrust, and which kind of stuck in my mind because it's an interesting way to look at it, and it kind of makes sense because in our modern day, especially for someone like me who's lived kind of in close proximity to cities and such his entire life, you don't really see the stars much. Like the sky is just kind of slate gray at night or black, and you don't, maybe you see the Big Dipper and the North Star and such, but you don't see much. But in the past, people lived in a very different world where if you looked in the sky at night, oftentimes you would see this huge expanse out in front of you, just with like these mysterious glowing entities out there. So it kind of makes sense to me that there'd be a certain like numinous quality to that, where it would kind of fill them with a certain awe or a certain kind of maybe a sense of dread around such things. And this is reflected, actually. There's a story in the Nihon Shoki of Amatsu Mikaboshi, who is a star, said to be like a chaotic star god who was subjugated by Amaterasu's enforcers. So there's this idea that there were star gods who needed to be kind of subjugated by the more earth gods that more closely associated with humanity. So there's kind of a distance there between the humans and like the order that they had with their deity ancestors like Amaterasu, and then the celestial gods. And I kind of go into detail on this in my book, and I another example I bring up is Gozu Tenno. So Gozu Tenno is a really interesting deity who's like Myo-ken, which I'm going to get into, was associated with Onmyodo, which is kind of like a Japanese syncretic version of Taoism. So Gozu Tenno was actually in the Hoki Naiden, which is a text attributed to Abe no Seimei, the famous Onmyoji. He was originally a celestial deity, whose name translates to the punishing star of heaven.
Interesting.
And Gozu Tenno is also multidimensional in that he comes down to Earth, and he becomes kind of a plague god who punishes men in accordance to their wicked karma. And he has like a good side where you can the mystics of the day would pray to him and things like that to kind of satiate him and be protected from disease, but he would also cause disease and cause plagues. So he was kind of considered a plague god.
Little Yama-like, maybe.
Yeah, kind of like that. Like a little like has like two faces, which is, I mean, that's common in Buddhism. It's for deities to have two faces because, expedient means.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to say when you were describing the deities who subjugate zodiacs or deities who subjugate stars. Well, I'm sure, as you know, we have a deity that does, well, at least holds the zodiacs in his skull cups, which is Guya Samaja. Oh, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right. Guya Samaja is seated. I was thinking of the right icon, wrong name. My bad. I'll leave this in. No problem. I get it wrong sometimes. Yeah, so you're totally right. It is Sri Habajra. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's also a common thing in Japanese Buddhism. When you go to the later esoteric periods, there's Ichijin Kinrin, I believe his name is, who is a form of Dainichi Nyorai who subjugates the stars and things like that. And so that is kind of a repeated theme, even when you go later into history.
Mm-hmm.
So there was kind of like a view of the stars as potentially dangerous, kind of distrusted. But like I said, there were certain beliefs about star worship that were imported via the Korean Peninsula into Japan. And those kind of formed like certain star worshipping cults. And one of the biggest ones was the cult around, I don't know if I'm going to butcher this name or not, Shintaku Reifujin. It's kind of a unwieldy name, but the name translates to the god of the protective household amulets. So, okay, this is kind of a weird topic, but it's essential to kind of understand. One of the beliefs that was imported into Japan from Korea was, and these are still used, I believe, in Chinese Taoism. There are these certain sigils, these like paper amulets that were believed to protect the household, and you could use different amulets for different purposes. And these, the form that these took is, if any listeners want to Google them, you'll see that they look like star constellations. Like they have circles that are like connected to each other. And so it was believed that these would have magical properties, and you can protect your home from like robbers, disasters, and things like that. And there were, I'm going to forget here, 74, 75, 76, I forget, 70-something amulets. There was a lot of them. And the deity who was the master over these amulets was Shintaku Reifujin, who was the god of the Big Dipper. And oftentimes, like there's these big versions of the amulets that have all the amulets together, and then this deity is like in the center, kind of like the upper center area, and there's like a symbol of the Big Dipper like above his head. And I actually have a small version of this. I have like a hanging up in my house. I was able to get a buy one from a temple of it was like a paper depiction of this same deity, and it has like the Big Dipper above his head and stuff like that too. So they do actually still make different versions of these. They're not super common, but you can still find them at some temples and shrines and stuff in Japan. So it's still kind of a living practice. So belief in these amulets and this deity kind of took hold in Japan, and the deity himself is believed by some scholars to have originated with worship around. There's a Taoist deity named Zuanwu, who is associated with Genbu, the turtle, the black turtle snake creature of the north. But I don't know. Don't worry about that. That's he's just know that there is a deity from China who resembles this Shintaku Reifujin, and which was transmitted to Japan.
Let me just add something really quickly. Is that Xuanwu has the association in Chinese with Mercury. So I know like people who are more Western esotericists who are listening to this, if they're thinking about like planetary colors, you would expect there to be black to be associated with Saturn, but in the Chinese cosmology, Xuanwu is associated with Mercury. So let me just say that, and then please continue. I am sorry to.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. He was associated with the color black, and that is that associated with Genbu. So Genbu, the tortoise of the north, is also usually black in color. So the direction of the north is always like black. I don't know why. That's just the kind of mimetic framework that they've used for a really, really long time. I think since like really thousands of years ago in China. That's just been kind of the framework that's been passed down. And actually, Bishamonten, so there's another tangent, but Bishamonten, one of the four heavenly kings of Buddhism.
Yes,
is,
I was just thinking of him.
Yeah, he's also he's sometimes called the Black Warrior because of his association with the North. So there's like a little bit of syncretism going on there.
Absolutely. They're closely, I would say they're closely related, but they're separated in Taoism, but definitely they have like instantly, if you're more Buddhist minded, you're going to think of the Yaksha kings. If you're more Taoist minded, you're going to think of the, Chinese northern god, like the mysterious dark man. So it just depends on like what cosmology you're kind of, I think, in a more, if you're thinking of it more in like a Chinese religious framework, like whoever you prefer, that or whatever framework you prefer is the deity you're going to worship primarily. But then there's like a place of meeting where you're kind of like syncretic and you're all at the same places. And you see this a lot with not just Chinese religions, but just Buddhism in general. There's kind of an acceptance of some people are going to think this, some people are going to think this, but we're going to think this. And we can still pray. Something a little tantric about that.
Yeah. I think Tantra really does kind of like tries to like kind of more formalize a lot of kind of unspoken elements of religion in its framework, and kind of give these like try to systematize them and have different ways of considering them. So you would see like different repeated elements in religion kind of pop up in tantric framework. Because I think I said this in a podcast we did together before, but Tantra is like has a very kind of scientific slant to it, and as far as that goes, I'm trying to like figure things out and poking at it to different ways, and it makes it really interesting.
It's very Luciferian, I like to joke, because it's like it just is like you're looking for the episteme of everything. You're trying to like source out the roots, see if this still viable, especially if you're using like my framework, which is more Rime, and then you're thinking of it like, is it usable? Is it not usable? Does it adhere to the view? Is it not adhere to the view? And you realize that like it doesn't really matter because everyone's going to do whatever they want anyway. But only you can do what like you're the only one who can only control what you do, really. It does offer some really interesting tools with which to map the sort of exterior religions into a more systemic way. That was really well said.
Oh, thank you. I totally agree with your perspective on that. But as far as where was I? As far as the narrative around Myo-ken, we haven't even got to where Myo-ken appears yet. But this is all kind of like essential to understanding what Myo-ken is in the grand scheme of things. So they via the Korean Peninsula, these beliefs kind of came into Japan and they kind of took root there. And so there were a lot of people who kind of worship these star gods, Shintaku Reifujin being one of the major ones. And a long time later, the esoteric scriptures started coming into Japan, like I said earlier, with like Kukai being one of the main guys who came in and kind of formalized these in the form of his Buddhist school. Tendai is actually based off the Tiantai Chinese school, and they hold the Lotus Sutra as their main scripture. But in the Japanese iteration of that school, Tendai, which was founded by a guy named Saicho, and he actually was an acquaintance of Kukai, and he adopted this same esoteric lineage. So some Tendai scholars would go to China, and they would also bring back different texts and things like that, and they would try to fit those into their kind of more Lotus Sutra centric framework. And so all these texts started coming in. One of those being the I can't remember the full name of the text, the Dharanis of the 7 Bodhisattvas, or something like that. It's a fairly obscure text. I don't think anyone's ever translated it to English in full. But the one of the major impacts from this text was that there was a bodhisattva named Myo-ken, who is said to be the king of the bodhisattvas, and the protector of nations. He offers a dharani that would protect your nation and bring it prosperity and such, which was a big deal because Mahayana Buddhism and then later on esoteric Buddhism in Japan and in other countries too. I mean, Tibet and China and stuff. It was a concern of the government. So there wasn't really any kind of separation between religion and Buddhism and the government at all. It was these things were supposed to be interrelated, and actually textually speaking, that's how it's presented in like Mahayana scripture and such. So like if you look at like the Golden Light scripture is like the classic example of this. So the Golden Light scripture speaks on how rulers of a country should adopt the Buddha Dharma, and it gives them like Dharanis and stuff to say for prosperity and such. And that's actually a major scriptural source for like the four heavenly kings, as far as the Japanese understanding of them as protectors of a nation, where it says like if a ruler rejects the Dharma and rejects the Golden Light Sutra, then the four heavenly kings are going to abandon the country and leave it open to like being plundered by robbers and such.
Interesting.
So that was like a huge thing. Yeah, that was a huge. And there was another one called the Benevolent King Sutra that had kind of some similar themes. So that was a huge thing in Japanese Buddhism, where it's and Nichiren talks about this a lot. The idea that you have to accept the proper law, or else the country is doomed. And that was kind of his primary thesis with the Mongol invasion. So he was very worried. That was one of the reasons he was actually so passionate, and he wrote to the government so often. He wasn't actually just trying to be annoying. He was he was very concerned about the future of his country. He thought that they were going to be invaded by the Mongols and they were going to get plundered, and there's going to be tons of rape and murder. And because they had rejected the Lotus Sutra, which he saw as the primary pillar supporting Japanese Mahayana Buddhism. So this was a big thing, and so of course, when you have a deity who's called the King of Bodhisattvas in the scriptural text, and he's giving a dharani for protection of the nation, and says that he's a protector of the nation, he's gonna be adopted into the framework. Because that was such a big concern. So you have this Bodhisattva, he kind of enters into esoteric practices. So Tendai and Shingon would recite the Dharani, and they had like other mantras and stuff associated with Myo-ken. They would pray to him, of course, for protection of Japan and such.
Is he considered a fifth of does he have any association with the direction kings in the center? I know I'm not asking it right, but they each of them has a cardinal direction, and then there's something. Sometimes there's considered to be a secret. Well, I think this. We had a little exchange about it on Twitter about Marasi. So she is considered to be like the Yakshini princess who like descends in between the four Yaksha kings of the four directions. So I just think that that's also interesting about Myo-ken, but I'm sure you have notes about this as well. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just find that very interesting and wondered if you knew.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I kind of associate Myo-ken with the North because of his association with the North Star. And
that's very interesting.
Yeah. And because of his association also with Zuanwu, who is like associated with the color black, associated with the North, associated with Genbu and such. So I kind of he seems to be kind of outside the four heavenly kings or Shiteno framework.
Okay.
I don't think he was ever meant to be integrated into that. But he kind of, so in some understandings, he seems to be kind of higher level than the four heavenly kings. He's considered a bodhisattva, so he's going to be kind of a little more high ranking than
than a worldly
kings, which are often they're considered devas a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, this is a very interesting point. Sorry, please.
Oh no, that's fine.
I just that's a very interesting idea because that's a more Buddhist understanding. Like there's a more clear hierarchy. This is something a lot of people miss in like when we discuss like the Buddhist pantheon and what that looks like, regardless of geography, is that we do have a clear hierarchy in like what we're talking about. It's not just like everything is everything. It's everything has its place.
Yeah, and I mean that's also to get a little side note here. If you look at like the womb realm mandala of the Shingon school and of the Tendai school as well, they adopted it. It actually has kind of a weird like hierarchical layout where you have Dainichi Nyorai at the center, and then you have the other Buddhas, and then you have various bodhisattvas, and then Shakyamuni and things like that. And then on the very outer edge, you have like the devas and like the more earthly gods. And so the image shows kind of like a hierarchy where you have one thing who's like the center, which is like ultimate reality, and then you have samsaric existence on the outside.
Mhm.
But it's also kind of shown as all one big thing where you have like the center kind of emanating outwards and kind of forming this complete whole. So it's I think that's an interesting that's one of the reasons I really like that mandala, is because it kind of shows these Buddhist beliefs in kind of a illustrative form.
I think you need a little both. Like I love I love an aesthetic post, but I think the like the word and the image, when they have like something like that, when it's like a mandala that you have in your mind, but you're also reciting the text when you're looking at it. There's something very powerful about that, very tantric, very like even just normie Buddhist, like even Pureland, people looking at an image of like Avalokitesvara or Guanyin or Amitabha or whomever, or Myo-ken in this instance, and like people just like doing like a small like offering prayers and things like that's very powerful.
Oh, for sure, yeah, and I think that's the reason why that kind of practice has, even in like you said in Pure Land or Nichiren and stuff, from more Mahayana oriented stuff, that kind of practice is very, very popular. It's kind of stuck, it's remained in as an essential part of them for basically the since their inception, and it's not going to be going anywhere anytime soon because it's such a useful form of practice. Even if it's like you're looking at like a Buddha image. So like actually an image, just a basic image of like Shakyamuni Buddha from like pre-esoteric Buddhism. So like the Asaka period and things like that. That in it is in itself almost a mandala, because this is kind of getting into like the tantric interpretations of Mahayana stuff. But so they have like what's called like the 32 aspects of a great man, 32 features, and each one of those kind of symbolizes a different aspect of the Buddha, and kind of like expounds his greatness and things like that. So all the physical features that they would put into Buddha statues and such, they kind of have like their own meaning, and everything means something. So it's this kind of tantric understanding of like the mandalas and saying a prayer or a mantra while you're looking at the mandala it's been kind of in Buddhism since the beginning, but it's kind of more formalized in the tantric form. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think you described it perfectly. I don't really even have anything to add. It's just that sometimes the mandala it doesn't have to just be the mandala. That's something that you understand once you practice Tantra, like for like a little bit of a time, at least, even just an introductory, is that you start to see the mandala in other things. So you start to be able to see like patterns and formations, and that in like geographies, or like people love to do the microchip. I love to do the microchip comparison myself, or with the yantras, or like those seals, those Taoist seals that you're describing. There's something very electronic about that. They look very similar to a microchip. I'm not saying they are or anything. there is something that's very deeply similar, and you can start to see that there's like a pattern, maybe that like is replicated. Maybe it's subconscious. Maybe it's just totally like I'm projecting. But I think that I think there are like patterns of, you could say, fractaline reality. That's a very Buddhist view, right? Like the whole idea of fractalization. So I think that's what the importance of like looking at the image is. It's like it helps keep you trained in single pointedness. But then everything is sort of like the Wu mandala. It's like the swirl of chaos, but it's not really in chaos because you can discern everything around you, because it all has a name and a place, even though it might be moving, it might be in flux. So I think that you did a great job. But I do want to talk a little bit about the iconography of Myo-ken, if you want to.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and I was actually gonna say like Myo-ken does have his own mandalas and things like that too, which is the primary one. So, oh man, where do I begin with this? So, in the original text, that esoteric text I spoke about earlier, Myo-ken did not have a description. They didn't have any kind of iconographical description for him. So in practice, he ends up kind of borrowing the appearances of other deities. Like I think you mentioned Marisi.
Yes.
So there are some early iconographical depictions of him where he resembles her quite a lot, and actually some historians kind of get them mixed up sometimes when they're trying to, because they look so similar. And that kind of makes sense because Myo-ken in some forms. So one of the primary forms that he took was he was the patron deity for some time of the Chiba clan of samurai, and in that capacity he took on the role of a warrior god.
Interesting.
And this warrior god is associated with the star Alcade, I think it's pronounced. It's like part of the I think it's the auxiliary star of either the Big or Small Dipper. I don't remember, but it's a star that Marisi is also associated with.
Very
so there was kind of and Marisi was also considered a warrior god for some samurai clans and such, and was quite popular among warriors in Japan, as was Myo-ken. So they kind of took on very similar capacities around the same time, actually. And so the Chiba clan kind of took on Myo-ken as their patron deity. And there's actually an interesting story about this. I read on a blog before. This is another tangent, but I think it's fascinating. I read on some Japanese blog that one of the most famous worshippers of Myo-ken was Taira no Masakado, who was beheaded in battle, and he ended up becoming a famous onryo, which is like a wrathful spirit. And when you talk about onryo, Masakado is one of the primary ones who comes up. But he was a very famous worshiper of Myo-ken. He was his clan, I think, was associated with the Chiba clan in some fashion. But it's said that the people who defeated him were his defeat was kind of like part of the legends around Shinshoji, the famous Shingon temple in Narita, Japan. And I saw a blog that said, "Oh, if you're a worshiper of Myo-ken, you shouldn't go to the Shinshoji temple because of this association with the defeat of Masakado, who was a Myo-ken worshiper." But I thought that was a bit bizarre because I had visited Shinshoji earlier that year. It was last year, and there's actually a subsidiary shrine to Myo-ken in the temple grounds. So I was like, yeah, I don't think that's the case. I think you could probably worship Myo-ken and go to the temple. But there's all kinds of like little like superstitions and stuff around like Japanese temples and shrines like that. Not all of it makes sense, but that's just
that also, that's also a thing in Indian Tantra. Like I'm not necessarily Buddhist Tantra, but like Shrivija. There's about the Kamakya temple, with the very famous, one of the first tantric temples of both Hindu and Buddhist. One of the places where like the Indian tantrics gathered when they were starting to even develop what Tantra became. So there's even a superstition about the royal family, like seeing the goddess. She supposedly dances on the dark moon nights as a yakshini, so very ferocious. Like, and so only the priest was allowed to view her, and so the king wanted to view her, so he said, "I'll grant you like a title if you let me come to her like dancing." And so then the priest and the king were both decapitated. And so basically what I'm saying is that the royal family has a prescription. They can't even view the temple. But what is true for them isn't necessarily true for the normie, we'll say.
Yeah.
So that sometimes is what gets recorded as the mythos, right? Like there's like, oh, this is like evil. But no, it's because there was like an actual transgression for like higher caste or higher class people.
It's a very similar thing. All kinds of like superstitions and such around, oftentimes around historical figures like that, like you said, and like the Masakado in my example, that stuff, those play into like popular beliefs, quite often. But as far as Myo-ken is concerned, so that was only one iteration of Myo-ken, was as a warrior god. He was also adopted by one of the Tendai sub schools, at least. There's a few, but what is it? A Midera Temple. So he was a very big figure at Midera Temple on Mount Hiei, which was like the headquarters of Tendai, and he was associated with, I guess there was like some water. I'm trying to remember this. There's some bizarre details where there was like a spring there. Some water springs were associated with Myo-ken and said to have had healing properties. And he actually became a very central figure in their worship there, where he was considered kind of one of the more powerful emanations of Dainichi Nyorai or Mahavajrayana. And he kind of like his kind of role like changes depending on who's doing the worship, what kind of iteration, what's his capacity being. It's very kind of fuzzy. So what makes it hard talking about Myo-ken, because there are so many different iterations, so many different utilizations of his name and image. And so there's those two, and then there's like a third major.
Interesting.
Yeah, I know it's
so interesting, because I'm making associations that I'm going to talk about after, but I'll
okay.
keep going.
Actually, I got to use the restroom real quick.
No problem.
I'll talk about.
If you need to go. But we can call it here and then do a part 2 if you want.
Okay. Or I guess I'll finish up then, because I'll finish. Yeah, I'll finish this detail at least.
Okay.
So the third iteration of him was taken on by actually the Nichiren school, and this is one of the most fascinating ones because it's actually very common for to see his like iconography or So all right, how do I explain this? So he was integrated into the Nichiren school, Nichiren Shu to be more specific. Shōryōshū is very minimalist in their iconography. But so he was integrated in Nichiren Shu because there was a Nichiren priest who went to a place called Mount Nose, a mountain called Mount Nose. And the people there were worshippers of Shintaku Reifujin, who I described earlier. So they had the kind of an astrological cult there. And he integrated that into his conversion of the people there. So he taught them the Nichiren's Lotus Sutra Dharma, and then he kind of integrated this star deity as a kind of protector of the Dharma for his iteration of the Nichiren beliefs there. And there's actually, so the statue that you find for the Nichiren schools is actually it looks kind of like some of the other Onmyodo deities, where he's very warrior-like. He looks like kind of like one of the four heavenly kings, but he's usually seated and he has his sword raised, and his sword that kind of comes out at a right angle. And it looks kind of like the Big Dipper, kind of how it like bends.
Interesting.
So that was believed to have originated at this mountain, Mount Nose. And I think he's usually referred to as the Mount Nose Myo-ken. And he's actually the one you see a lot of, like, probably most often these days. And you can see him frequently at like Nichiren temples. There's a YouTuber who I really like named Miki Dayun, who's a Nichiren Shu priest in Kyoto. And he has a YouTube channel where he tells different ghost stories and things like that, and tries to relate them to like Buddhist teachings and things. And actually, he has one channel that he does in his temple where he talks about more Buddhist-centric ideas and things like that. And behind him, you can actually see there's a statue of Myo-ken sitting on the altar behind him. So he's pretty common. I actually visited a Myo-ken temple when I was in Japan last time as well. That was Nichiren school. So this is still a living tradition there. Even though Myo-ken's importance has been kind of diminished throughout pretty much all the schools over time. His presence is still fairly strong. But so that's kind of this third capacity. It's kind of as like a protector god of the Nichiren school.
Amazing. Okay, so I have so many notes. I'm gonna let you go, but I want to say that next time, if you want to do a next one, we're going to talk about Maharishi Dharani. We're going to talk about how these three concepts, the idea of even the three concepts themselves, that number 3 is relevant to her functions, color functions for Buddhist color magic, and we'll also talk about Xuan Wu and how a lot of the things you said, his poses, and his sword, and all interrelate. So thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. You were, as I said, a true saint, a true homie that saw me from beginning till to this period where I'm at now with my show. So I really appreciate it. And you are an incredible guest. You are welcome on any time. And please let people know where to find you, and I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on here. I always love these conversations. It's just like man, there's so much like you want to talk about, but it's like it's kind of like the Three Stooges are trying to go through the door at once. It's like, oh, how do I even approach this topic? There's just so much I can't decide. Man, and there's so much like I haven't even talked about as far as Myo-ken goes, because it's such a huge topic. Like I think we would probably have to record like a 30-hour podcast if we were to cover the whole thing. But I tried to condense kind of the basics.
You did great.
Here.
It was fire. It always is. It's honestly these conversations that you and I have had, these three now, have been some of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded, like throughout my history. And I think that this one will obviously be in my top 3 as well. And so I appreciate it. And I hope you come back. I hope we can discuss Myo-ken. I find him extremely fascinating. I love this idea of the protector deity, protector of the Dharma. There's Maharishi is the protector of the Kala Chakra Tantra. It's like the right time to talk about this stuff. And so I think people are ready to hear it. And so I think it's a very interesting discussion what arises. So plug your Twitter, your Substack, and your Gumroad, and then you can go.
Okay, yeah. So I'm on Twitter at JigokuCake, JIGOKUCAKE, JigokuCake. And that's where I'm at most of the time. Just a lot of times I'm just shit posting, so don't expect intelligent Buddhist conversation all the time. And it's just whatever I feel like is on my mind that particular moment in time. And then my more serious, if you want my just my more serious long form stuff, I'm writing on Substack. The Substack is called Spiral Seas. And like I mentioned earlier in this podcast, I'm doing right now. It's a multi-part series. I'm writing the third part right now. I'm not sure how long it's going to end up, but it's kind of integrating like different different materialist and psychological ideas. Like the first part I did like anti-Oedipus, like from Deleuze and what's the other guy's name? I can't remember. Deleuze and the other guy.
Well, the Dharma Bros will love that or have loved it because this is often such a discussion, like how to blend continental philosophy with these more like psychedelic dharmic ideas. So I love your Substack. I think it's great. I'll make sure all the links are in the show notes, like everything, like always. And I highly encourage people to follow you, to buy your book, to subscribe to your Substack, to just like really look at your work, because it is very edifying and also like very dynamic. And I think it's like right for our time, right for our Kalpa. So
thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. And that was Guattari, by the way, the other guy who wrote Anti-Oedipus. But anyway, so that was the first part, and I'm continuing integrating ideas, and so I'll have the third part on there soon. And one more thing, my books. So a lot of my books are on Amazon. You can find my newest one, which is Devadatta, Who Was a Good Friend. Is the full title. You can find that on Amazon. It's in hardcover. It's in paperback. Hardcover is $16. Paperback's $8. You can also find it on my Gumroad. That's Hungry Ghost. I want to make sure I got the URL correct. hungryghost.gumroad.com. So that's pay what you want. It's $1 minimum for that book, and I got all sorts of books on there, and other ones on Amazon as well. So I got some reprints of like I've republished some public domain sutras. I got Vimalakirti Sutra on there and the 3 Pureland Sutras, and then I got I republished a biography on Nichiren called Nichiren the Buddhist Prophet. That one's really good. That's a great read if you want like a primer on Nichiren and his theology. So those are on Amazon hardcover as well, and you can find them on my Gumroad as well.
Well, awesome, and everybody check it out. I highly encourage it. I think you're like a legendary guest. Like when you said yes that you would come on the first time, it was like a top 3 person, and I got him like right away. And then to like be in conversation continuously, it's very meaningful. And so I highly encourage it. I highly encourage people think of Dharma, and maybe even think of esoteric Japanese Dharma or the Lotus Sutra. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. And this stuff is always super fun. I really enjoy it. And I love doing these talks. I really appreciate having me on again.
Yeah, part 2 coming up then.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Okay.